I have a quick question, if you guys don't mind. My name's Brian Brewer, resident of Bright, Indiana, Dearborn County, lifelong. I have a couple questions, and good evening, guys. Appreciate your giving me time here. I just was down here tonight to observe the ruling on the zone map amendment that you guys discussed earlier up in Manchester. I was kind of watching that closely. From my understanding, had a large group of individuals from the affected area, joint property owners, things that came down to the planning meeting and expressed their opposition to the zoning change proposal. I had heard that they had legal representation. I was not in attendance at that meeting. However, I was in attendance at a planning zoning meeting back on May the 28th, 2024, that concerned the zoning map amendment for 4 parcels in the center of Bright area, which also are part of the TIF district that he was just talking about, where a request was put in to change the zoning on those lots from B1 business to high density R3 residential area pertaining to development of townhomes. Similar to the story that Nicole was telling about the Manchester meeting, this room was packed full of people, clearly 99% of which, the ones that got up and chose to take time at the podium, communicated their opposition of the proposed zoning change, citing several of similar complaints and such as what Nicole was describing earlier. However, that zoning amendment was given favorable recommendation and therefore later passed by you guys. And as a resident of the community, I'm just curious as to, and I applaud you for representing the wishes of the people of the community of Manchester who were here earlier speaking out against that development. But I'm curious why, what was the difference? Was it that they had legal counsel? I mean, what made you guys feel more compelled to side with the residents of Manchester and reject that zoning amendment change where the people of Bright weren't afforded that same consideration, it seemed?
We usually go with the recommendation of the planning commission, because the planning commission has people sitting on it that understand the differences and how things should work. And we've got surveyors and folks that have been on the board for a number of years. And we usually go with their recommendation, and that was the recommendation they made.
Right, and you were in attendance at that meeting, correct?
Yeah, and I listened to what people have to say.
Right, I didn't know if you had a recommendation for us as residents, if we're trying to
That's why we have the planning commission in place, is to evaluate those things and then advise us as to how they should go.
I understand that. I'm saying as a resident, would you have any advice to me or others in the community as to how we can better communicate our feelings about proposals and developments and things that occur in the county so that we can feel better represented?
I'll say, so there's specific criteria that have to be met for a rezone to go through.
I was talking to them.
I'm gonna tell you exactly. Sorry.
Yeah, I
Apologize. Well, there's specific criteria that have to be met for a rezone to go through. In my opinion, and if you guys disagree with me, please let me know. My advice would be to highlight, if you're opposed to a rezone, my advice would be to highlight specifically how the requested rezone does not meet those criteria.
We did. I have video of it. I would feel very confident to feel that the wishes of the people and their objections to it were very valid and expressed very clearly that night, and that's why I'm posing this question. If there was something you guys would recommend going forward for us, I didn't know if there was something procedurally that we didn't do. I mean, clearly the opinion of how people felt in the room was made very clear that night. I think you wouldn't disagree with that. Not getting into any of the specifics of it, just in the most general sense, as a citizen and a representative government trying to be represented, if you guys would have any advice that you
I
would
think
give.
Nicole would like to weigh in.
Yes, so the thing with rezones is they can, I wouldn't even ask them to compare the two. You can't compare two different cases.
Okay,
So when each request comes in, that's why each request gets a meeting on its own and an own staff report and its own review, and because the county as a whole is not the same. So you have to look at each case individually and differently. So to tell a citizen that in one area to do it this way versus another way to look at it this way, it's hard to do unless you're listening to what Andy said as the criteria that's based in there, and then you would have to get specific for each case to be able to explain that difference.
well, we were pretty specific. I think we pointed out a lot of the drainage problems that actually
And the-
became
and
a
the
strong
board was-
argument
the Plan Commission-
for the TIF district.
The Plan
so.
Commission was very specific in their, recommendation as well.
But in both instances, it was spot zoning, in both instances, it was in contradiction.
Spot zoning, no, I would
To the-
say spot zoning for Bright was not the case for that one.
Please let me finish. It appears to me to be spot zoning in that in both instances, you had a reversal or a change of position or proposed change of position on, you guys had just redone the whole county zoning map back in February, you know, and even with the
We
thing
did
in
not
Bright.
touch commercial or industrial properties. We did not change anything related to business or commercial, B1, B2, or industrial properties. We
Right,
have-
it was residential, but in this change, you are changing a former business property to R3 residential within the constraints of a business district, so it's kind of an outlier in its proximity of things that surround it. I get that behind it on Memorial Drive and further back you have residences, but it is in a business cluster with Bright Automotive and Shift and Performance Electric and a lot of other businesses. But I wasn't come down here to debate any of these things. I was just asking you guys, again, appreciate your service to the community and just trying to ascertain if there's a better approach that we can
To
take.
answer your question, you're doing what citizens should do. You went to the planning, the redevelopment board, or, planning.
I've been to all of them.
Okay, you're doing what you
Right.
should do.
Well, I appreciate that.
In some
sentiment.
cases, based on the board's recommendations and based on the judgment of the elected board of commissioners, they're gonna support what you're asking for, sometimes they're not.
And my last point that I'll make, and I thank you for your time, is that I understand and acknowledge that there's a lot of specific, intricate details about both of these zoning changes that are quite different from each other, as Nicole has pointed out. However, to the average person and resident in this community who, maybe don't have the background or the knowledge to articulate those specific differences and changes, at a surface level, it appeals as a resident that we're coming down here and doing our best to express our feelings as citizens of the community about some of these proposals. And, we're seeing kind of a difference in, which I understand specifics are different, but in one situation, a room full of people come down here and say, hey, we oppose this, and it gets an unfavorable recommendation. In another situation, a same room full of constituents and adjoining property owners and people in the immediate area come down and express the same thing, and they get, and then a favorable recommendation is given. In that instance, it feels inconsistent, at the surface level and to the eyes of the layman just kind of glancing in from afar. So that's all I would have to say. So, but I appreciate your time, appreciate you guys listening to me, so thank you.
Anyone else with other comments?